We're about ready to go live, Mayor.
Good day, and welcome to the Marin County Fire Chief's historical website. What we're proposing to do today is just doing a chat, kind of a year-end review of what we have posted this year, and along with my fellow Fire Chief Paul Smith, retired from Kentfield. 2020 was quite a year, and it's still a challenging year for the fire service. But we had some wonderful stories this past year, and we just thought we'd kind of go back a little, revisit them, and review some of the stuff, and talk about those people who contributed and what we have projected for next year and so forth like that. So I would just like to start out with first talking about the articles that were written by Bob Marcucci, retired fire chief from Sarah Fell. I think people should revisit those stories about the large fires that occurred in Sarah Fell. It's great history reading if you're a fire buff. But of all the stories that we did in this past year, the one that for some reason I would consider our number one is the story about the engineer by the name of Paul Smith, the gentleman who was instrumental in the development of what we call NFPA 13D sprinkler systems for single family homes. And with that said, I'd like to turn it over to his son to talk about what his father accomplished and the significance it has to really the worldwide home safety. So at this time, Paul, it's all you. Talk about your dad, please.
Thanks, Bill, and thanks for a nice introduction this today. We did this series a couple months back on fire sprinkler systems and fire life safety systems that have developed since the 1970s in the United States. And you and I talked a little bit about the advent of commercial sprinkler systems, and then the next big jump, I think, was probably smoke detectors in homes and businesses, fire alarm systems. And then, Bill, you and I talked about 13D, the fire sprinkler systems for homes, and how that evolved. And I said to you, yeah, my dad was on the NFPA committee back in the day that put that together. So yeah, my dad was fire protection engineer. He worked for Gage Babcock and Associates practically his whole working career, and was very involved and he cared a whole lot about fire and life safety. When we talked, you and I talked earlier, when I took some fire science classes down at that station behind you there back in the 80s and the 70s, we talked about codes and ordinances and how they're developed and this and that. And we talked a little bit about the fire loss in this country. And you brought up one thing that we should all read, and that was America Burning. And that was published in 73. And America Burning at the time estimated that were about 6,200 people a year, citizens a year, died in house fires in this country. And my dad was probably in the middle of his career. And he was a prominent fire protection engineer. So he applied to this new committee that National Fire Protection Association put together. And they were going to, from scratch, determine how to best provide life safety to get people out of the homes. So that was the start of 13D.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I consider, like you brought it up, I consider what happened is like when President Kennedy says we're going to go to the moon and back,
Mm,
no idea how we're going to do it. When
mhm,
that committee that your father was on had absolutely no idea what equipment, how it's going to go about. When you start to read the requirements that were determined as part of the testing
mhm.
to make sure that thing worked and how it is absolutely astonishing and stuff like that. So, what do you think the significance in life safety has been since that Interfaith 13 came online?
Sure, sure. Well, as I mentioned before, Bill, back in '73, the America Burning study attributed about 6,200 people a year dying in structure fires in their homes, and about 3 times that many were injured, severe, to require hospitalization. Um, and in the '80s is when fire sprinkler systems in homes were either optional in some jurisdictions or required in others. So from the early '70s to the mid '80s, we saw the death rate in homes go from about just over 6,000 to about 4,000 people, just over 4,000 people a year. And 10 years after that, in 1990, below 4,000 people. And today, the latest stats I've been able to take a look at was um, last year's, so it'd be 2019. And we lost, it's still too many people, but we lost about 2,000 people due to indwelling fires. So if you take a look from the '70s to now, it's been, what's that, 50 years almost, we've seen a decrease in fire death from over 6,000 people to just about 2,000 people in the United States. Is that all attributed to sprinkler systems in homes? No, we don't. I don't know how many of those deaths were prevented, due to fire sprinkler systems. But as you know, building codes have been stronger building codes, and of course smoke detectors in homes too. So all these things together have contributed to a decrease in people dying in their homes due to fire.
Yeah, as we talked earlier, Paul, we both have a friend who's both a volunteer with UF Kinfield and with Larkspur, Brian McLaren.
Mhm.
Brian actually experienced a working structure fire in his home that was sprinkled, and part of that system is the smoke detector awakens the family to begin exiting the building. And he did that. The smoke detector went off. He gathered his wife and his kids, and as they were leaving the building, he heard the first sprinkler go off, and
Hmm.
the fire was contained by one sprinkler head. So, I mean, that's just, I think, a typical story of people who, I still maintain that in fire prevention, um, this sprinkler system is probably without a doubt, will go down in history as well. Well, and you kind of remember we have a nation of 300 million people living,
Hmm.
and we're in one of the biggest industrial countries in the world. And although 2,000 is a lot, it is not a lot when you look at the size of the country and who we are. So again, I just want to think it's just a wonderful story, and I need
Yeah.
to be told. Okay, so
Yeah, thanks. And that
yeah,
was my dad's whole push. It wasn't necessarily to save the property, it was to get the people out alive. It was a life safety program. That's what it was. But what we're seeing in the real world, we're seeing, like you just told a little story about the McLaren's fire at their home. What we're seeing is these fire sprinkler systems are knocking down the fire. So it doesn't make a difference if you have an extended ETA from your fire department. Necessarily, if the fire gets knocked down in the incipient stage, let's hope it stays knocked down.
yeah.
And the fire sprinkler system's designed to flow a couple of heads in your typical
Yeah.
single family home.
And of course, like one of the spinoffs of that 13D system was the 13R system, using the same materials and to protect apartment houses
Right.
up to 4 stories high, um, only calculating 4 heads, 54 gallons of water. And again, there has to be a significant change in a loss of life in apartment houses
Sure.
also because of the spinoff from 13D, which created 13R
Right.
residential. So again, we're moving forward. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and thanks for bringing this up. I know you were very, very involved in fire prevention in your career at Larkspur and still are today. And you can appreciate that. Not everybody appreciates to the same level some of the stuff that those engineers put together
Yeah.
from scratch.
That's
Really?
right.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely nothing.
Right. Right. So, you mentioned the fire sprinkler system. And fire prevention is, your hot topic for 2020. And, I look back, I did the same thing. I looked at 2020 and it was my first year, my first full year joining the Marin Fire History. And I've had a blast putting articles together for the group. And it's been a challenge. This year has been a challenge because you and I like to sit down with a camera at a table and talk about with one of our fire history folks on whatever the topic may be, interview or whatever it is. And I really enjoyed talking to the folks this year on the firefighter sleeper programs from the 70s and the 80s. I really enjoyed that because, like Larkspur, Kentfield had a passel of sleepers. And I know that, Fairfax, for instance, they had a sleeper program. And I'm really glad we were able to kind of historically document this because we talked to, 4 or 5 folks, had a real interesting time, but it was a challenge trying to interview these folks on Zoom and then put a cohesive program together. I think we did. I think it was more difficult than, I thought it would be initially, but I take a look at the sleepers in the sleeper program and for the professional firefighter agencies in the county or the combination departments back then. I'll tell you what, Bill, if you make the analogy to a baseball team, that was your bench.
Yeah.
That was the fellows that you were teaching about fire programs. And, like we said, a hot cotton, that's all you needed. And we had a lot of fellows come through the county, through Marin, that started a sleeper program and went on to be, paid firefighters all over the state. All over the state.
And it's amazing how many turned out to be chief officers when you start analyzing all the names that came through. But on a sad note, in 2020, Larkspur volunteers who were formed in 1897 were dissolved this year. It's just it's the times. It is. To be a volunteer now requires so much time and study because of the rules and regulations, both at the state and federal level. It is very difficult for a fire chief to maintain a volunteer fire department because, to be honest with you, the liability of getting a volunteer, it's easier for a citizen to pay $300 and donate a couple $100 a year than their time. So it is with sadness that both Quartermanere and Larkspur now go to the column that we carry on the website of former fire departments. So, and being a member of that since 1958, it's kind of sad, but I understand the times, and I have no problem with that. So again, they did well for 100 and some years. So
they did.
Yeah. So
they really did. And that's why I think it was important to capture that on Marin Fire History, because the programs that were so abundant and flourished back in the 70s or 80s, we were able to talk to 4 or 5 or 6 of those sleepers and they told us how it was.
Yeah.
And it isn't anymore. It isn't anymore. It's a different world.
It truly is. Yeah. And all for the better, really all for the better.
Yeah.
So I think so.
Well, I know we talked to one of the sleepers. I can't remember who it was, but that town turned their fire protection over to their sleeper program on the weekends.
Yeah.
Tell me, that's true, right?
So Saturdays at 12 o'clock in Larkspur, sleepers were in charge of the fire defenses for the city.
Yeah.
Monday morning at 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
1980.
And I know in Kentfield the sleepers covered the shifts too. I mean, the chief would go home on the weekend and we could get into this at any length, whatever we want to do, but the evolution of the volunteer programs, because all of our departments started out as volunteer programs.
Yeah.
In our towns.
I think looking back this year, one of the I'm glad we did is the interviews we did with Fred Bunker as it related to his involvement in what is the Fire Academy. I mean, we were kind of just struggling trying to put together some kind of training program for firefighters, and you would now end up being called Firefighter 1 and so forth. And that in the interviews we did with Fred and his involvement in what is now one of the best fire academies probably in the country, far exceeding those some in California. I'm glad we gave Fred some time.
Oh yeah.
Show off and talk about what they did. It was a great accomplishment, and it's just a continuous great thing. And every class is full. I don't think ever since it started, every class has got 40 students, and that's how many people come from all over the country to come to this fire academy. I knew one gentleman who called me on a rainy night from New York. He was a steel worker, a high steel worker. I heard about the academy. I told him how to get a hold of the next thing you know, my son is graduating for the academy, and there's this kid in the same class from New York City, and turned out to get a job in San Jose and went back east and went to Lexington Fire Department. So again, Fred deserves all the credit for continuing the fire that he and Doug Archer started early in the game. So yeah.
No, that was a good segue from the sleeper program to the College of Marine Fire program, and then of course the College of Marine Fire program moved towards the Regional Fire Academy.
Yes.
So you were an instructor for years and years at the College of Marin, and when the college was no longer being able to support the fire science program, I mean, you're absolutely right. Fred and a handful of fellows took that program and launched it to where it is today. And when we talked about the sleepers and the volunteers, there wasn't a requirement. There wasn't even any training. There was no Firefighter 1. That hadn't existed yet, right?
There was nothing. In those days, back in the 58s, when I got into business, the state training had a number of instructors posted throughout the state. And we had a gentleman in Santa Rosa. His name was Harvey Gruber. And he was one of the state instructors. They would come around in their white coveralls, and they would put on an 18-hour class on weekends for volunteers and paid on how to throw salvage covers. But that was the training for California in 1950 and early into the 60s until we started. Marin was the 4th college in the state to have a fire science program. And it did a wonderful job. Hundreds and hundreds of firemen in Marin and Sonoma County through that program, and they can thank that program for their careers.
Right.
So
you're right. And I'm seeing a comment here, Bill, on our chat. This is to you. And it says, Kathy and I watched your video of the month, the life story of Bill Ellis and your career this morning. It was good to see you. Hope all is well with your world. Merry Christmas, the Cunyas.
Oh, Ed and those guys. Yeah,
So,
good, good.
so we do this. You and I think, do this program and do these articles because we really like the history side.
Yeah,
We really like the history side, and we're able to preserve a few pieces.
yeah,
And what I appreciate, and I'm sure you probably do, is when somebody in our audience, whether they're from Marin or they're from across the country or France, and they ask us a question or they enjoy our program, and so it's getting out there a little bit. I'm enjoying putting it together.
yeah.
And if we have some ideas from the folks watching on maybe what they'd like to see,
Yeah.
That could be fun for next year. I know that we have a number of things already in the can to show for 2021, and you and I and Dan have put together a few ideas on some things we're working on for 2021. I know you're working on another program, a couple of programs, and I am too. It's going to be fun.
And again, I want to throw advertising out there. We want anyone and everyone who knows someone that think their story might be of interest to us. If we'd love to interview them, we will go Zoom them and interview them until they can tell their story as part of their history, this is a story. When Tom started this, Tom Forrester started this website. The whole idea was to record the fire history of Marin County. And so far, I think we're doing an okay job. We still have a lot of work to do, a lot of people, but we want to invite people. It's very relaxing. You can see two old retired fire chiefs talking, and that's all it's about. Sit down with us and tell us your story. That's what it's all about. One of the stories I enjoyed, was the one with the helicopter pilot.
Yeah.
I met Tom, and he's a mechanical engineer, and I met him he's installing sprinkler systems in my community that I inspect. And I asked him if he would like to be interviewed, and he agreed. And I knew he had seen action in the Middle East. I know he was fired upon a lot, and he was in the National Guard here in California, and he has flown hours and hours, hundreds of hours over wildland firefighting, grabbing water from lakes and ponds and so forth, and not being shot at, but I think those guys who fly those planes during fire situations is as dangerous as having enemy fire upon you. So I thought that story about Todd Bonner, and I think Todd's going to retire this month from the Army, officially from the Army. And I think, if I recall, he will not fly anymore. But so this season was probably Todd's last year flying above fire. So yeah, that was a good story about him.
Yeah, it was a really good story, and kind of how this evolved is after we talked, I got a hold of Jimmy Barnes, who was a fixed wing pilot. So I think in 2021, what we're anticipating is doing a story on fixed wing firefighting. And you're absolutely right. Dangerous job. And until recently, there wasn't any benefit for fallen firefighter fatalities in aircraft, which I'm glad they finally fixed this. But we'd like to have Jimmy on in 2021 to talk about his experience. And I think it'd be a hit like Todd's. I think it's going to be a nice piece. And
yeah, people, a lot of interest would be if he would agree to be interviewed. I think
so.
What these guys do.
We've got a question here from Paul in Mill Valley, and he's asking to us, if I will be doing more written stories, or we're moving to all 100% to visual.
No, we'll be doing written stories. I'm writing the story right now, doing the research and putting it together. the story of Tom Forrester, the gentleman who created this website and did so much, contributed so much to the Marin County Fire Service. How it went when we first started the program, and Tom asked me to participate in research and do some articles, and it was always his intention to videotape anyone and everybody in the county. And so one Saturday afternoon in Novato Fire Museum, Tom and I, Forrest Craig and stuff, we set up and we interviewed our first two old volunteers, both from Larkspur, a gentleman by the name of Oakley Dexter, who's in his 90s, and Dale Eubanks, of both Larkspur volunteers because of Tom's association with us in the department. And that was our first interviews that we did. And what people don't realize is those interviews are about an hour and 20 minutes long, and they would be condensed to a 20-minute program for airing time and so forth. But if anyone wanted a relative or someone like that, we have probably 50 to 70 interviews on tape that we would be willing to share to a family member or something like that. So we've, and we plan on, and we want to interview more people. And we hope to do that. But so what I'm doing now is, here's how I went. He would interview me, and I was one of the first guys. You haven't seen it yet, the tape, because we're holding it for reasons. And then I was going to interview him. And with Tom's schedule and work schedule, we kept putting it off. Next week, next month. And of course, next week and next month didn't come. So in these last couple of years, I spent a wonderful meeting with his mom, Diane, this past week. We spent 3 or 4 hours together talking about our history and Tom's contribution to the fire service here in the county. And so I have decided to write Tom's story as we missed it on an oral interview. So I hope to get that out to publication for the readers, Tom's great story, late January, 1st of February. And I got a few more people I'm asking to do some contributing to it. So we will be writing more stories. I'm working, I got writing on the history of the Alto Fire Department. So we're working, we're doing our research, and thank goodness for paper archives.
You know, and that the other piece that came up that we've talked about is the Green Beret Volunteer Fire Department, and you know, the mystery department, right? And then I'm drafted a piece, and I'm almost ready to print it out to publish it for Marin Fire History. Is the Olompali fire.
Oh yes,
up in Otto. You know, I've been sketching that out for probably 6 months, and you know, the reason that came to be is because somebody out of the blue watching Marin Fire History happened to be on site that night in Olompali. He was sleeping in his van, and observed the fire take off, and grabbed the camera out of the back of his backpack and took a couple of pictures, sent us those pictures. So that's how the story's evolving.
Yeah.
And I think, Olompali fire, it was a really significant event for this county. It's very interesting. Took place a while ago in the 60s, so it's historically a good piece to put together. But a few months ago, Bill, when you and I and Dan chatted about maybe doing a written piece about Tom Forrester, that just blew me out of the water, man. That's just so cool. It's just so cool. So much. It's a lot of work.
It is. And he deserves to be recognized for the firemen yet to come. But those who receive his award on an annual basis will know who Tom Forrester was.
Right.
He documented here on the site, and it'll be stored also at the Marin Historical Site and the Marin Library.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I think that's totally appropriate. Totally appropriate. Yeah.
To answer the question, yes, we're writing. We hope that Chief Marcucci will be contributing some more this next year. And anyone who also wants to write a story about their fire department or someone in their fire department historically, we welcome it. We
Yeah.
welcome it. Give us, send us a draft. We'll help you with it, whatever it takes. So I think next year is going to be one of our best years.
Yeah.
That's how I'm looking at it. So.
You know, and on written articles, Bill, we received a piece from a woman up in Terra Linda that talked about the Terra Linda Fire Department.
Yes.
And we put that on the website a couple of years ago, and it was interesting because for my sleeper piece, I interviewed Eddie Mestry, and and Ed was a volunteer with Terra Linda Fire Department, as it found out. That's how he started as a sleeper there. Went on to paid positions, spent some time in Santa Fe, and retired finally with County Fire. He had a long career with Marin County Fire and retired as a battalion chief up there. So that's kind of how we weave this together a little bit. You know, the sleeper piece and Terra Linda Fire, he was a sleeper in Terra Linda. And the next thing you know, we get a nicely put together article about somebody that lived in Terra Linda at the time and a little bit about what they remember about Terra Linda Fire.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah, it's absolutely, it's fascinating. The stories are yet to be told. So
Yeah. And I see on our chat line here, we have another question. They found this interesting. Bill, another question for you. Will you be doing Ask the Chief again? I found it interesting.
Yeah, that's how we got with you on board. Remember, we interviewed you. We've interviewed any chief that wants to, and some chiefs who are reluctant, and I understand, giving them credit, they're reluctant to want to be interviewed, which is their prerogative. But if anyone wants to be interviewed and has history to tell us, that's all this is about. We want to record the history of the Marin County Fire Service, because it's leading us every day. It's moving on. We're moving on. The history gets further back. So we want to record, write anything we can about it. So,
yeah. Yeah, like you and I say, you know, every year we put another candle on the birthday cake, and we just try to keep moving on. And
I'm trying to keep the smoke detectors from going off all the time. Yeah.
yeah. I've got one coming up in a couple of weeks now. I'll be 67, so I'm just a young guy. That's what you keep telling me.
Yeah, you got guys like me and Bob Marcucci, well, you know, we're very fortunate to be talking to you.
Yeah, no, and you've got so much to offer. That's the deal. And when I came, you know, on board with you folks, I said, you know, you asked me if I'd like to participate. And as you know, we've talked before. As you know, I'm writing the history of the Kentfield Fire District. That's how I got started on this. And my point is, if we don't do it, who's going to do it?
That's right. Yeah.
If we're not going to record the history, if we're not going to write this stuff down like Chief Marcucci did on those great articles, and you put some stuff together, I put some stuff together, and I'm going to say it again because it deserves to be said. This is all on Tom Forrester's shoulders. I mean, he laid the foundation for this.
Yeah.
And you know, he had the foresight a number of years ago to put this together, and you know, it's an honor working with you guys. It really is.
Now, I'm hoping once this virus thing is over with, which seems to be a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel here. And I heard today that they're actually going to start selling and authorizing home test kits for the virus, which will be great. But anyway, once this is all said and done, I hope everyone that would like to encourage is to visit the trees that George Lucas planted in memory of Tom out at the Skywalker Ranch. I know I'm not open. I'm not telling Skywalker to open their gates to us, but I think I think sometime we should have a day where anyone in the fire service could come out and just look at and take them and spend a moment looking at the dedicated tree to Tom.
Yeah.
Where it is. But I just want to add, I don't want to forget that we've added another member to the team, Jim Mann, a dispatcher from the Marin County Fire Department. who's not available for us today, but Jim is contributing stuff and has made a great contribution. And he just kind of stumbled on the site, and we knew he had a lot of good information, so we made him a member of the team. I don't
Mhm.
want him to be a member of the team, but he is one now. So, and that's how we got you. Same thing, remember?
That's it.
So
Well,
we're
you went-
and everything.
yeah, you went on a fishing expedition, and I was dumb enough to bite, right?
Yes, you did. But yeah.
You know, and you mentioned the COVID and the pandemic stuff we've been dealing with, and earlier this year, kind of as how the fire departments have responded to crises in the past. We did a piece on the pandemic crisis.
Yeah.
Now, we took a look at our past practices on how fire agencies, fire folks have responded to, earthquakes, floods, catastrophic fires. And, I thought it would be nice to take a look and to see in the present time how they're responding to the pandemic. So, we had a couple of folks come on and with Mark Brown and Jeff Davidson, and they were in the Marin Medical team that was, trying to get their hands around COVID and in the early days on how do we respond to this as first responders and as EMS folks, out there in the real world. And I think, well, I know they are. Now the big push is how are we going to get the vaccine to the folks in Marin County, this Marin County specific I'm talking about. And I know they're working their tails off trying to figure out the best way to continue the testing, and then what's the mode going to be for, Joe on the street to be able to get vaccinated in the next 3 to 6 months. I don't know yet.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's one of our biggest challenges as America.
Mhm.
It's almost as bigger than like World War II, how we
Mhm.
gathered ourselves together to control what happened in World War II. This distribution of this virus. I know just yesterday, I am currently the fire marshal at the Rodeo Hercules Fire Department. I live in Hercules now. And I just was asked on the email if I wanted to take the vaccine. And of course, I said yes. But I don't expect my wife to be eligible for the virus probably till March.
Mm.
Our age, and stuff like that. But the light is there; it's coming. It's just got to hunker down and hold the ground for a little longer,
Mhm.
and we'll be good. We'll all be good.
Yeah, it's been a really tough year. And I'm not being specific about Marin Fire history. I mean, it's been tough enough to put interviews together and work on Zoom and try to, our producer has a big needle, so he says, and threads our stories together very, very well. But it's been a tough year, Bill. I mean,
Yes, it really has. Yeah.
I'd like to go out to lunch with you and share a cheeseburger or something. We just can't do that.
No, I can't. My son Michael is retiring on the 19th. He's a captain in Santa Rosa, and I can't do nothing. Can't even go up and hug him and say, "Hey, well done." So
Yeah.
it's time. It's coming. But I think all in all, Paul, it's been a tough year. But I think we followed the intent that Tom had in mind.
Right.
We kind of filled that void. It was very nice to talk to his mother. Yesterday we had her on Zoom. And again, I want to give credit to the guy who's not being on the air today. Is webmaster Dan White, an old San Anselmo Drake High School kid. He's not a kid anymore, but it's he that keeps us going on the air and putting everything together. And he deserves some credit, a little credit, not a lot of credit. But he's done a wonderful job picking up.
Yeah, he sure picked me up this year. He really has. I mean, it's been my first year here, and it's been tough as kind of the rookie of the of the group here, but you know, it's you and Dan that keep me going and keep it going here. So yeah, you're absolutely right. So thanks for bringing that up, Bill. I mean, Dan deserves
Yeah.
credit for the man behind the curtain.
Well, what do you think, sir? You think we talked our way out? Are you pretty much?
Let me take a look at the chat here.
Yeah.
Oh, we hear from Art Wiedemeyer. Art Senior was with Larkspur, wasn't he?
And Art's grandfather was a volunteer in Larkspur.
Yeah.
His father was a Korean veteran. He wounded in Korea at the reservoir. Art Wiedemeyer, he and I worked together. He worked at Treasure Island and came over to work in Larkspur before he went into his own private practice. So yeah, and Art Wiedemeyer is born and raised in Larkspur, when Wood Bud worked for us. So it's nice to hear from him. So what's this question?
Yeah, here's what Art has to say. It says to Chief Paul and Chief Bill, here's a comment. I'd like to thank everybody for the great work and the stories of the history of Marin County Fire Departments, past and present. So, you know, keep those cards and letters coming, folks. We enjoy it. I hope you're enjoying it as much as we're enjoying putting every article together for you. And Merry Christmas to everybody, and the best for a happy, healthy 2021.
Yeah.
Let's hope we get back to normal, huh, Bill?
Yeah, we will be. With this time next year, if we're still, it will be in good shape.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, Paul, I'm going to say goodbye and wish you and your family the best and happiest and safest of holidays. Okay.
Thanks, Bill. Take care. Nice chatting with you today.
All right. See you later. Bye.
Yeah, take care.
Bye, everybody.